Be there on time and take part in the proceedings. I know most of you would not have been Okay, so we have just 1 or 2 minutes. We'll give and then we'll start right after 10 o'clock. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's begin. Today, the focus is e-commerce and e-business. We have actually one more session on another topic, but that would be the focus today. So this morning, I'm going to give you essentially an overview of e-commerce or e-business and the laws governing it, and how well people are compliant. And then this afternoon, I will come back with a couple of tutorials on e-commerce. One is on the e-commerce technology aspects, and then immediately followed by technology or tools that you can possibly think of to make e-commerce vendors and users comply with all the laws and regulation. That part will be very creative if you are thinking of starting your business in support of e-commerce. You can think of what are the areas that I can automate for compliance or people follow the regulations. So there's a lot of work that can be done, and also it'll be challenging for you to think through how to automate various legal compliance, okay? So I think that's the way we'll do, beginning with some technology aspects and overview, okay, and then go into actual what it takes to build an e-commerce site, and then part of that, what you build, how do you automate the compliance part, okay? So that's what we'll do. Okay, so this is the objective for this session. Understand what e-commerce and e-business are and how they are different from commerce in a brick and mortar store. We're going to spend a good bit of time on identify laws and regulations on operating in e-commerce, specifically B2C site in India. Okay, e-commerce can be business to business, individual to individual, but the one we are going to comment is business to essentially consumer. Okay, that's where most of the efforts are, and that is where most of us are involved. Okay, and okay, so when we do that, there are couple of areas that we wanted to focus as well. One is what is called the safe harbor protection of intermediaries. What it basically says is people who are hosting sites, okay, generally are not responsible for bad content, as long as they do their due diligence, okay? That essentially, exempt them from being sued, okay? And that's important. There's an equivalent law in the US, and now almost every country has that, okay? And that is basically what called Section 79 of the IT Act. And of course, the laws against defamation and business disparagement online. Okay, so yesterday we saw whatever the law was passed that was sort of unconstitutional because it's too vague. But the original law on defamation and disparagement, that is even before e-commerce. That is still very applicable, whatever you do online. You cannot, say things that's not true, first of all, okay? And so we will even talk about what is the difference between defamation and disparagement, okay? So that's what we will do today. Today we'll first take a look at the what e-commerce is all about, or e-business, and then go into the legal aspects. Okay. Any question on the objectives? Okay, so one question immediately comes, what is the difference between e-commerce and e-business? Okay, so e-commerce generally means there's a transaction sold, bought, done online, okay? Whereas e-business is a little bit broader. It has to do with everything you do online, including, we already seen one, e-contract. Okay, there's everything done online. Okay, so basically e-business refers to all types of business activities done online, and it includes e-commerce. For example, you may be doing email marketing, you may be offering a service for other other e-commerce, inventory management for them, okay? Because any e-commerce system has to be constantly aware how much things are, how many items still left of any particular type. You don't want to overstore, you don't want to understore because you lose the customer. So there's online inventory management is a major function. In fact, what we are going to look at today, nowadays the way the systems are built, they have a lot of mini services. So if you want to offer a new e-business and compete against Amazon, technically you'll be able to do that by putting all these things together, okay? And of course, one of them is online inventory management system. These are not really, they're not directly transacting with you, but they are helping the rest of the online business, okay? And then of course, online job boards, including LinkedIn, for example, okay? So there are many others, okay. So, and then the issue with the YouTube and Netflix, it's sort of, it could be considered as e-commerce or it could be considered e-business. The reason is, in the case of YouTube, you're not paying any money, you simply watch it, okay? But you could be paying, so it's a sort of a transaction. You paid and they provide you service, in which case it's become e-commerce. But if you're doing it free, okay, it's not really a commerce because there's no transaction. You're simply watching it and you have to put up with all the commercials. Okay, that's the only thing you go through. So technically YouTube can be either e-commerce or e-business. But I just put it could be anyone. Netflix is usually subscription based. So it is more e-commerce because you pay and you get the service. But YouTube could be either one. Okay. All right. So that is sort of the, when we talk about e-commerce and e-business, sometimes we may not distinguish, but the clear distinction is e-commerce is more transaction oriented. Okay. And usually you pay one, you get something. You pay something. Okay. That's more e-commerce. E-business is much broader. And it could be to help other e-commerce. Okay. And the e-contract we talked about day before or yesterday, it is e-business. For example, companies like DocuSign, they support it. So essentially, they are the one who running the e-business. Okay. So There are a lot of charts you can follow how e-commerce is growing up in India. This is one, it looks to me is more reasonable. They are not throwing all kinds of numbers. So if you look at it from 2021 and up to this, I'm pretty sure they validated it. So it's sort of a growing, I wouldn't say double, it's probably less than double, but it is getting there. Okay, so between this is a 4-year jump. But essentially the idea is sometime before 2040, it might hit $1 trillion. Okay, so that's the Indian e-commerce market right now. Okay, this is just the e-commerce market. So obviously it is getting bigger and bigger, and that means more and more of us have to understand the laws, both as a business owner as well as if you want to sell, if you want to be selling, you have to also follow a lot of rules such as how to pay the taxes, and what right you have when you list your product in say Amazon or Flipkart, how fair they are to you. All those things you have to know a little bit about the legality, whether you have any chance even competing with the big players. Okay, so that's where the growth of e-commerce is. Okay, so even e-commerce, let's say it's not e-commerce, e-business. It could be 4 different types: business to business, business to consumer, which we are going to focus today, and consumer to business, and consumer to consumer. Okay, the consumer to business is essentially, it's like, for example, you may be a tax attorney and you may be offering your service to various online companies. That's the consumer to, whereas business to consumer is what they are trying to sell you, various products like Amazon and so on. Okay, so that's the consumer to business, means consumer is selling to business, where business to consumer means business is selling to the consumer. Okay. Okay. Now, so if you look at all the laws and regulation, basically, these are the areas that you have to have laws and regulation so that e-commerce is smooth. It has to have a laws and regulation on shipping and delivery. It has to have a laws and regulation on refund policy. And also liability limitation is how much you can sue if something is not fulfilled. Okay, I mean, you cannot sue $1 million for something just because, for example, you order a bouquet of flowers for a nice day, nice date, but it's not delivered. You can say because of it, I lost that woman, or I lost that man, so it is worth $1 million for me. Pay me. It's not going to happen. So there are some liability rules. And also handling returns. This is something often you worry about because you open the package, the item you want to return, but who's responsible to packaging it back? Who is responsible for paying the postage stamps? Who is responsible even taking to the post office? Will they come and pick it up? Okay, usually, you don't have to worry about loss because if they want to do business, they will make it very reasonable for you to even return. But again, the bigger players can do all that. Little vendors, they will ask you to pay the return postage stamp. That way, they're also making sure that you don't return too often. So, but anyway, some of it is set up a business issue, you don't have to be legal, but some of it you have to force vendor, otherwise it won't happen. So handling returns, and what shape the return should be. Could you have used it for 1 month and returned it? Okay, because I wanted to make sure the shoes are good I will know only if I run 10 miles on it. Okay, can you say that? Okay. And the truth is true. Sometimes you got to use it for a couple of days to see whether the shoe feels right. But it's not allowed before you return it. And delivery terms. How are they supposed to deliver it to you, the vendors? Could they leave the package outside your house? What protection they have to take? And of course, any data they get it from you, what is the how are they going to protect it? Whether it be your credit card information, whether it's your liking, the person you order for, all those information they have to keep it private. It used to be they used to sell this to other vendors, and without your permission because they will come and bother you. Okay, so often, you get targeted advertisement when somebody knows your preference, and the question is how much is it allowed? Okay, finally, when you advertise something, it has to be compliant. That includes reasonable truthfulness, okay, and not necessarily putting another product that's as your competitor in a disparaging way. So there are a lot of rules about compliance, advertising compliance, especially in online too. But a lot of it comes from the regular, not online, but they're all still applicable to online advertising. Okay. Okay, so what we are going to look at in the next, 15, 20 minutes, we are going to go through the e-commerce laws and regulation under various categories. One is basic commerce laws. That has nothing to do with e-commerce. That has been in existence long before e-commerce came along, but you still have to follow that. And then what does the Information Technology Act 2000, what laws it has to ensure e-commerce is done properly. And then of course, both actually IT Act as well as DPDA has Digital Personal Data Protection Act. We have already seen this, and we'll just quickly go through it because you have to follow those laws. I already mentioned that the Intermediate Safe Harbor Act, which basically protects the middleman from the bad content of the people who use the platform. Okay. Okay. And also the Reserve Bank of India has a lot of strict regulation about Payment and Settlement Act 2000 and the payment mechanism. Basically, it has to be secure. It has to be through some certain standard like DSS, data security standards it has to follow, which is universally followed. India also follows this, so we'll take a look at that. Again, we touched upon yesterday copyright, trademark, and so on. So when you are online advertising, in a company, if you use somebody else thing, you have to give credit for it, their trademark, for example. Okay, and also you shouldn't have trademarks that's very similar to there, or even for that matter, the name of your URL shouldn't look like somebody else, because that's a deceptive. Okay, and of course you have to, if you have someone's content, if it's copyrighted, you have to make sure you have the permission to quote those parts. Okay, so usually patent is an issue only when you implement the e-commerce system using the technology. It shouldn't have been pirated. But the other two is basically the system that you're displaying. Okay, so the copyrights and trademarks are more important. Okay, and also there is a lot of cyber squatting rules may also apply. And as I already said, online disparagement or defamation. Okay, there is a difference between defamation and disparagement. Do you know what it is? Okay, so usually defamation is against a person. You are defaming them, okay? But disparagement is more to do with another business. Often, to say your product is better, you may say something against your competitor, which may not be true. Okay, so in a lot of these things, you could do that as long as it is true. But sometimes truth cannot be easily verified. Okay, so you could get away with it, but generally, a basic principle on all these things is as long as it is true, you can get away with it. But sometimes you can get away with it because it's hard to prove one way or the other how true it is. Because sometimes the difference between fact and opinions is very thin. Okay. Anyway, okay. And then foreign direct investment, FDI policy. There are rules by which controls who can invest in the Indian market. Okay. But to the extent I can understand, it is not being followed. Otherwise, Amazon wouldn't be such a big player here. They're finding loopholes, okay, to be a big player here. So we'll talk about it a little bit, okay. Even Flipkart, okay, essentially these guys have followed all the rules. They get foreign investment, but it's not supposed to happen. But somehow they are getting around it by various loopholes, okay. And then goods and services regulation. I'm not going to talk a lot about it. For one thing, I'm not a tax attorney. But the main thing is, whatever you used to pay is still applicable, the goods, the GST tax, except in the older model, often the seller has to get the tax from you. And now in the e-commerce, often the intermediary, the website has to collect the tax from you and then pay the government. They also have to pay a small portion of all the transaction revenue that goes through them. In addition, okay, GST. Okay, so again, I'm not an attorney, tax attorney, specialized in India, but all I can tell you is all those things are applicable that you used to do before online, except one difference is the withholding of the tax, GST tax, sometimes falls on the platform, not the seller. Okay. And also, there's a lot of complaints when I read this. People are not, the intermediaries are not paying their taxes properly, and there's quite a bit of issues. To the extent I know, none of them has been convicted so far. But again, I'm not following everything. But that's how it's going on. Okay, so we are going to go and take a look at each one of them in some detail. Okay, and okay, so this is what we call basic e-commerce laws and regulation. Okay, so each one, I'm just giving you a feel for what area it covers. Okay, again, it's not completely complete, but basically gives you a good feel for it. The Sale Goods Act 1930, so it's long before internet came along. That basically stipulates disclosures on sales, shipping and return and refund policies. So, things like you ordered through mail in the past, all those laws are still applicable, okay? And Consumer Protection Act 1986 essentially says, you cannot, for unfair trade practices, one of them is, for example, bait and switch. You come there with the thing, And then when you're ready to order, that won't be there. 10 times more expensive product, it happens all the time, the bait and switch. Okay, but there are laws against it, but people are doing it. Even airlines like Indigo, the first page it will say is 4,000 rupees to fly from Trichy to Menai. Then when you go there, only 6,000 rupees tickets are available. Okay, I mean, this just constantly happens in India more so than in other places, but that's unfair trade practices. And again, you're protected against poor service. A lot of these issues is essentially how much you're willing to go after legally to get your thing. That's the issue. That's why they get away with it. And then Indian Contract Act, we briefly discussed this when we talked about e-contract. So, essentially, and if you want to make sure, the contract has to be valid and it has to satisfy all the e-contract also has to be valid contract. It cannot be for illegal act. All parties have to agree. There got to be something exchange, okay? And all the exchanges have to be clearly said, and the timeline should be specified, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the next one is there are several things here. They all regulate the labeling and packaging. Okay, so what that means is you cannot claim in the pockets like Amritanjanam. It'll say if you just use it, all your headache will be gone. I mean, they do it, but these are the sort of deceptive practices, especially in the medicine field. You're so desperate, and you believe these things. And then you buy, within a few days, it doesn't work, okay? So in general, there is a lot of labeling, all kinds of claims are made, and they are basically deceptive, they're illegal, and so on and so forth. For example, I see all the food items, it will say, so only 100 calories, you'll feel great after that. It turns out it'll be 800 calories, sugary stuff, and then you don't even feel like getting up after eating it, okay? These are very common here, especially in my view, a lot of the food things are not properly labeled, but again, there are laws against it. Okay, so the e-commerce rules 2020 is the one for e-commerce complaints in India. Okay, this item it covers includes transparency in pricing, fair practices, grievance redressal mechanism, and product quality. See, the redressal mechanism is very important because you may be getting something sitting in Chennai, somewhere from Chandigarh. Okay, so, essentially, it's the easy way to contact them. And if you call by phone, nobody picks it up. I mean, things like this always happen. Or you have to wait for 25 minutes before somebody will come online. Okay, so it must be easy way to address your concern. This happens in the US as well. Dealing with the business to get a fair thing sometimes might take several hours. And the time is on you, not on them, okay? Because they will put only 2 people in the phone, to answer phone, when in fact 1,000 calls might be coming every hour, okay? So this is the sort of a practice they do, but again, there are laws. The question is how well they are followed, how well they are punished, it's a different story. Okay, so, what is the next one? Okay, the next one is Information Technology Act that governs e-commerce. Okay, so we have seen some of this before. Okay, let's go through them. The section 10A states that contract formed through electronic means is very acceptable, okay? So just because electronic doesn't mean it's invalid, except what happens if you don't pay stamp duty, okay? So that's something to think about. Section 3 of the IT Act provides legal recognition of digital signatures. Again, we went through that when we talked about e-contract. Okay, so we did that. And Section 5 of the IT Act validates the use of electronic records. In other words, you don't have to provide a physical copy. Electronic records itself, primary evidence. Again, Prakash touched upon it yesterday or day before yesterday. And then Section 17 to 35 regulates certifying authorities for providing you digital certificate. Okay, so, India, you do have a public-private key infrastructure is allowed, but there are other forms that are also allowed. Okay, so this is something, e-commerce entity has to do, reasonable security practices and procedures on sensitive personal data or information. Again, Prakash touched upon it, I also touched upon it a little bit, to protect such data from unauthorized access, disclosure, damage, and so on and so forth. So even before the privacy legislation came out in 2023, IT Act did stipulate e-commerce website have to protect your personal data. In those days, it was called personal sensitive data. Only data like your finance data or healthcare data or whatever. But it was already there. Of course, now we have after Privacy Act, the type of data that has to be protected is more than sensitive data. Almost every personal data have to be protected. That's the one difference. Okay. Okay, so since then, this 2023 August we passed it. Again, it is still not quite been put in place. We just have the law passed. Okay, it requires e-commerce businesses to implement strict data privacy practices, including obtaining explicit user consent before collecting data. So this actually says you have to first opt in, not opt out is the choice. And of course, it also requires security measures by which you will protect them, and you have to disclose them by security policy. So if you go to Amazon, you can ask their security policy. You can ask for privacy policy, and you should specify all these things. Okay. So why is the GDPR? The DPDRA follows GDPR. If there are European Union citizens' data is on the website, e-commerce website in India, they still have to follow GDPR regulation. In other words, as long as the data is on European Union citizen, the e-commerce site have to follow those rules. Okay. I mean, it's not a big deal because now India has its own rule for Indian citizens, so it's not extra work. Before DPDPA came, GDPR was still applicable because GDPR came in 2018-19 timeframe. So, now that we have DPDA, it's not a big deal for companies to do that. Okay, so this is that Intermediate Safe Harbor Act. Okay, basically what it says is, provides legally protection to online intermediaries, like social media platform and website that host from liability for third-party content posted on their platform.